Theodore Robert Bundy, born on November 24th, 1946, was an American serial killer who kidnapped, raped, and murdered numerous young women and girls. During the 70s, after more than a decade of denials, he confessed to 30 murders he committed in 7 states between 1974 and 1978. Bundy's true victim total is unknown. Bundy was regarded as charismatic and handsome, traits that he exploited to win the trust of both victims and society as a whole. He would typically approach his victims in public places, either faking an impairment such as an injury or impersonating an authority figure after bludgeoning them into unconsciousness and taking them to a secondary location to be raped and strangled. Bundy often revisited his victims, grooming and performing sexual acts with the corpse until decomposition occurred. He decapitated at least 12 victims and kept their severed heads as mementos in his apartment on a few occasions. He broke into dwellings at night and bludgeoned his victims as they slept. One biographer described Bundy as a sadistic psychopath who took pleasure from another human's pain and the control he had over his victims to the point of death, and even after. He once described himself as the most cold-hearted son of a bitch you've ever met. He has also been described as the very definition of heartless evil. January 4th, 1974. Bundy attacks a University of Washington student. Then attending the University of Puget Sound Law School, he attacks a University of Washington student Karen Sparks at her Seattle home. Sparks becomes one of the few Bundy victims to survive, though she suffers permanent brain damage from the attack. July 14th, 1974. Bundy strikes twice in one day. Posing as a police officer in Murray, Utah, Bundy lures 18-year-old Carol DeRanch from a mall into his tan Volkswagen, where he attempts to apply handcuffs before she escaped. Later that day, 17-year-old Deborah Kent disappears after leaving a high school play to pick up her younger brother. Investigators find a key in a parking lot that fits the handcuffs used on DeRoach. January 12th, 1975. The killer surfaces in Colorado. A 23-year-old nurse named Karen Campbell disappears from her hotel in Snowmass, Colorado, after leaving the hobby to retrieve a magazine from her room. Her body was found a few weeks later in a snowbank outside the resort village. August 16, 1975. Bundy is briefly apprehended when Highway Patrol stops a tan Volkswagen that has been lingering around outside a home in Granger, Utah. He is then arrested for a ski mask and crowbar and an ice pick and handcuffs, which he had in his car, and is charged with evading police, but the detainment does not last long and is soon released. October 2nd, 1975. Bundy is selected from a police lineup. Although previous efforts to identify Bundy has failed, DeRanch and 2 other women point him out in a police lineup. He is arrested and charged with attempted kidnapping. March 1st, 1976. Bundy is convicted for his abduction efforts, followed by a 5-day trial, during which he is waived the right to be heard by a jury. Bundy is found guilty of aggravated kidnapping, drawing 1 to 15-year prison sentence. October 21st, 1976. Bundy is charged with first-degree murder. Investigators link Bundy to the death of Campbell, to the discovery of her hair in his car. June 7th, 1977. Bundy escapes from a library, allowed access to the law library. Unshackled and unguarded, Bundy leaps from the second-floor window and heads into the mountains. Following a 6-day manhunt, he is found driving a stolen car and is returned to custody. December 30th, 1977. A slimmed-down Bundy disappeared from his prison cell. Moved to an allegedly more secure facility in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. Bundy loosened enough weight to squeeze through the opening cut through the ceiling into the duct system. He exists into the empty apartment of a prison worker, changes clothes and escapes once again, eventually winding up in northern Florida. January 15th, 1978. Bundy kills 2 students and injures 3 more at Florida State University, breaking into a sorority house around 3 a.m. Bundy strangles the life out of Margarita Bowman and Lisa LeVay, and beats Kathy Cleaner and Karen Chandler with a club-like object before fleeing. He then enters another home a few blocks away and brutally assaults another student, Cheryl Thomas. Cleaner, Chandler, and Thomas survive their injuries, though none is able to describe the attacker. February 9th, 1978. Bundy strikes one last time. 7th grader Kimberly Leach disappears in the middle of the day from Florida Lake City Junior High. At age of 12, she is significantly younger than Bundy's usual victims. Her body is found 2 months later under a shed in Swanee River State Park. February 15th, 1978. Bundy is apprehended for good after pulling over a car with its headlights off at 1 a.m. and finding the plates match a stolen vehicle. Pensacola police officer David Lee finds himself in a violent scuffle. The driver, unwilling to give his identity right away, the man eventually reveals himself to be Ted Bundy. After admitting to numerous murders, Bundy sits for an interview with evangelist James Dobson and blames his horrid behavior on alcohol and pornography. January 24th, 1989. Bundy is put to death by electrocution at a state prison. He is strapped down to an electric chair at around 7 a.m. These are but a handful of his crimes. It has come to my attention that Ted Bundy has a bit of a cult following of fans that admire him. And I don't know what everybody's opinion is, but in my opinion, he was not misunderstood. He was a horrible person that did terrible things to people and simply got what he deserved.